All right, so I'm going to follow on where many of the previous talks left off. Not so much communism, but we may get to it eventually. But more offer networks, post-money economy, the singularity, and all that good stuff. And fortunately, Francis did a lot of my work for me by introducing the basic concept of an offer network and exchange networks, how they connect to the global brain and their potential to transform the economy. So that's a lot of material I would have gone over as he had not done it, and that gives me a little more time to talk about broader implications and the technical underpinnings and sort of flesh out some of the ideas. So I don't have that many slides. I have a few slides on offer networks, but mostly I'm just projecting here some of the key concepts I'm going to go over. So the general framework that I bring to my thinking about the future of the economy and money and exchange and so forth is with some overlap to what Cadell was discussing. I mean, I'm broadly in agreement with Ray Kurzweil and other radical futurists about the likely advance of technology during the next few decades. I mean, the exact pattern and rate of advance, none of us can know, but I mean, Ray has made his argument that we're likely to have human-level AI in an AGI, general intelligence sense, by around 2030, and then he believes massively superhuman AI around 2045. Now, he pinpoints these dates with far more precision than I would be comfortable doing. But
I feel exposed now. It's too soon.
Yeah, I can like to put it the other way.
So usually you can dim the light here.
Up to you.
How about this one?
This looks good.
I like it better. I like it better this way, personally. Yeah. Yeah, I don't quite. I'm not as much of a determinist as Ray is. So I mean, although the curves that he and his assistants have plotted showing the advance of computer technology and brain scanning and miniaturization, I mean, I basically buy that argument, but I would draw the confidence intervals a bit wider than he tends to. But still, I mean, I would be shocked if we didn't have the sorts of things he's mentioning sometime during this century. A very advanced intelligence, nanotechnology that lets us build things fairly flexibly out of molecules and maybe even below the molecular level. And things that we would now consider more radical. I mean, mind uploading, porting the mind out of the brain into some other medium. So my worldview is one where I think many of these technologies are coming, and you can see that around us all the time. I mean, now in the biology domain, CRISPR, which is a recently developed technology for gene editing, I mean, that's starting to come out of the lab and into the clinic. Right now, the first therapy for curing a certain type of blindness using gene editing in humans should start human trials in 2017. And then I saw last month some Australian university scientists have figured out how to make a quantum computer on a silicon chip. So all of a sudden making it more apparent how, in 10 to 15 years, we could have like a QPU, a quantum processing unit next to the GPU in our laptop. So it's exciting time to be alive, for sure. And there's the possibility of what many people have called radical abundance. I mean, Peter Diamandis most recently has adopted that term for his own personal brand, but the idea has been around for a while, right? And I mean, of course, as some will point out, according to physics as we know it, there will always be some limitations. We can't make infinitely much stuff with no cost. I mean, there's special relativity that limits how fast we can gather resources and so on. But still, from the perspective of human beings, we seem to be trending toward a future where the amount of resources that humans need in order to conduct satisfying lives may be very cheap and not difficult to come by. In the same sense that fresh water is very cheap in the developed world right now, it costs something to provide. And if someone tries to get like 10 million gallons of fresh water out of the water fountains around Brussels with a system of hoses, someone will stop them. But the amount of fresh water that we tend to need for our lives, it's just there. And Wi-Fi is increasingly provided for free in many public places. It costs something to provide, but it's cheap enough that we just give it away in the developed world. And we seem to be trending toward a future where that would be possible for food, water, shelter, internet connectivity, transportation on the surface of the planet. So that's an economy of abundance, and it seems technology will enable it. And of course that has huge consequences, as many of the previous speakers have been pointing out. I mean, it's an increasing trend in the newspapers recently to wonder whether we're finally getting to the point where robots really will take all our jobs. I mean, people have been saying that forever, or for half a century at least, a century or more. Hasn't happened yet. People are starting to wonder, is it finally happening? And I think it is, and I think we're going to see that more and more in the next couple of decades. And part of the reason we're not seeing it so much yet is because of the rise of what many have called bullshit jobs. I mean, when I look in, say, various universities around Hong Kong, I see many people employed there in administration, sitting at desks and pretty much on Facebook most of the day, it looks like. So, I mean, people are being paid to sit in an office all day and go on social networks all day and play with their phones all day. In fact, they may be doing 2 hours of work in the course of the day, but they're being paid to sit at the desk all day, right? So, I mean, in part, rather than liberating everyone from going to work, in the developed world, many people are being liberated from doing work while sitting at work. And that's interesting because many studies show that people reported greater satisfaction while sitting at work than while at home, because at home, their wife or their husband, their kids are pestering them to do stuff. I mean, they've got to take out the trash, wash the dishes. At work, they just sit in a comfortable desk and surf Facebook, right? I mean, a lot more pleasant environment, right? So I think that there is a fundamental dynamic going on of automation, not just AI and robots, but simpler automation, as much as like a French fry chopping machine in McDonald's is not AI. In a sense, it's a robot, but it is automation. I think this is diminishing the need for human labor, and this is obscured somewhat by the way society just creates make work for people, because psychologically, people would kind of rather be sitting at their desk than dealing with their family and doing annoying things at home. But there probably will be a limit to that. And we may be starting to see the limit in some parts of the world now. And this plays a significant role in the need for and the nature of these offer networks and post-money exchange mechanisms that I'll be talking about in a few minutes. Now, part of this singularitarian perspective entails the potential for humans to become massively more than what we now consider human, and the possibility of creating machines that could, in the future, become massively more intelligent, more capable than human beings. And I think that's a real possibility, and I know not everyone here will agree with me, but I mean, I agree with Ray Kurzweil that within the next century, we're very likely to see AGIs, artificial general intelligences, that are as much smarter than human beings as human beings are than, say, dogs or cockroaches. And I mean, Nick Bostrom and many others have gotten a lot of headlines recently. Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, Bill Gates, by raising sort of fear and worry about, what happens when you have a super intelligence that doesn't care much about people. I mean, when we go to build a new mall, we don't worry much about the ants whose homes were under there. And similarly, as Eliezer Yudkowsky put it, the AI will not love you, the AI will not hate you, but he can use your molecules for something else. And it doesn't have to want to kill you to just see we are a very inefficient organization of these elementary particles. We could be used to make him a bigger hard drive, right? So, I mean, that worry is there. It's worth thinking about. I think it's significantly overblown, but that would be another talk and another topic, and you can't reduce that worry to zero. On the other hand, my suspicion is that even assuming that happens, there's a reasonable likelihood we're still going to have humans in some form, somewhat like we are today, perhaps enhanced, augmented, upgraded in some ways. And I mean, the world I'd like to see is one where whoever wants to fuse with a superhuman supermind and become 1 billion times more intelligent could do it, and whoever wants to remain in a form somewhat like we are now, but with improvements, could also do it. I suspect a lot of people would choose the latter, and some would choose the former. So if you buy that sort of potential future, then even given the singularitarian point of view, you still have the issue of organizing human society in a domain of abundance, because you still have human, even if we have molecular assemblers or whatever, creating lots of stuff for us. I mean, people who choose to coexist with each other on the same planet, even when you can get all the food and all the goodies that you want, there's still issues of coexistence, and there's still social issues. And if you want to form a rock band, or whatever the future version of that is, you still have to form the right people, and you want to play for other people in the audience and so forth. So I think actually the Kurzweilian singularity point of view doesn't obviate the questions of human organization and human society in the era of abundance. And it also doesn't tell you what's going to happen between here and there, which is what I'm going to talk about for the rest of my talk. So I mean, if you buy either my version of techno-utopia or Francis's version of techno-utopia, which overlaps but isn't quite the same. I mean, he views the global brain as sort of providing a quasi-utopic situation for humans. I think that's part of the story. I think we're going to see superhuman AGIs. One way or the other, we both see a future where there's so much abundance and so much global coordination and overall wisdom that people can focus on fulfillment rather than on struggling to get stuff and competing with each other over basic needs. But even if you buy that, there's a big question of how we get from here to there. And one more point. I worry about that a lot. I co-founded a company in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, as I've discussed with a number of you. And I mean, that's 85-90% subsistence farming still in that country. And you wonder, like, suppose that robots and AI and automation advance so fast that, in essence, the need to outsource work and manufacturing to these countries never comes about, right? Like, now you see China's getting too expensive, so factories are going to Thailand and Vietnam. So in a certain future, eventually Thailand and Vietnam get more expensive, factories will go to Africa. But if robots get cheaper and cheaper even faster, then the need to outsource stuff there would never come about. So then what happens? Like everyone else just gets stuff made by robots. These guys remain subsistence farmers. I mean, if we follow on to Cadell's talk and look at Thomas Piketty's analysis of increasing returns and wealth concentration, you have a potential future where like 10,000 guys own all the robot factories, mining stuff from the ground, making it into luxury goods for themselves. They own all the means of production. They don't need workers anymore. It just makes cool spaceships for them to jet around in. And then everybody else has to dig worms out of the ground because all the robot means of productions are owned by a few people at the top. And if that's what happens on the way from here to the utopia, it's going to be a lot of unpleasant ups and downs. So I don't think it's actually going to be that extreme, but I do think that these post-money exchange mechanisms that we've been talking about and that I'm soon going to verge into, I think that's important, can be an important tool for smoothing the path from here to the envisioned techno-utopia and making it more likely that along that route everyone is doing okay for the next 30 or 100 years, or however long it takes for real abundance to set in. Yes, sorry.
So I just wanted to make one quick point about ideology. I started my presentation talking about, and we're at a conference, by the way, to talk about going beyond money. And I started my presentation talking about oligarchy, and Francis pulled me down. Whereas you haven't talked about offer networks yet, but Francis still hasn't pulled you down yet. And this is ideology today. You can't talk about oligarchy, and you can talk about Kurzweilian singularity, but you can't talk about oligarchy. This is where we are.
That was not the problem. We started to be toward the TTIP and the EU and the crisis of the elites.
That's called oligarchy.
Wow.
We're at a post-money. We're talking about post-money. But he hasn't talked about offer networks yet. Why aren't you pulling him down?
But he has been focusing it all the time on the So we are anticipating their marketing.
This is Francis and Talk about AGI, post-humans, however you'd like. Talk about TTIP, and all of a sudden you're pulling.
You didn't tell them what you're going to tell them first.
So you're saying that this list is important.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, see, I put offer networks on the slide.
Oh, so you write the offer networks on the first slide, and then you're saying.
Yeah, there you go. It's all marketing. So.
Yeah. So conform to the ideology. Don't reject the ideology.
Yes, exactly. Perfect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a bit flattering if offer networks have become an ideology already. I don't know. I wouldn't quite go that far. But, the next point I wanted to cover before getting to offer networks. So this concentration of wealth is real and it is disturbing. I mean, in every country around the world, you see the gap between rich and poor getting bigger, although the poor are getting elevated. It's much slower than the rich are. And the gap between nations is also decreasing. So, I mean, there's trends on different levels. But at the same time, you have a democratization of information, right? I mean, as I mentioned in a few conversations, this year when I go to Ethiopia, everyone in our lab has a smartphone. And granted, these are the cream of the crop of Ethiopia. They're graduates of the top universities there. They're not the poorest people in the country, but now they have a smartphone. And when we hire interns from the university there, we have them take like 5 Coursera courses before they start their summer internship. So they take 1 Coursera course per month for 5 months, and then they've learned enough to be interns for OpenCog there. And, they can take these Coursera courses on their phones from home, because many of them don't have a good home internet connection. And these courses are free, right? I mean, they can take the exam for free, and we have them take the exam and show us the results. So they don't need the official certificate. So you've got a concentration of wealth on the other hand, you've got a democratization of information and knowledge. And offer networks somehow sit between these two, because we're talking about trying to use the same tools that have brought the democratization of information into the economy of physical stuff instead of just information. I mean, now knowledge is sort of spreading in a way that's outside the oligarchic, money-oriented economy. Not totally, because you're going to pay cash for that smartphone, even if it's only 40 or 50 US dollars. But you don't have to pay tuition, you don't have to buy a textbook. And what's interesting about the offer networks and post-money economy line of thinking is you're taking these dynamics that have arisen for the spread of information and you're starting to use them for the spread of more concrete goods and services that we use to move our everyday lives along. And that has interesting potential, right? I mean, as Cadell pointed out, that has the potential to be a force countermanding the increasing concentration of wealth that Piketty and others pointed out. And it also has the potential to restore more of what some people would call humanity to economic transactions. And that comes down to what Martin Buber referred to as the I-it versus I-you interactions. And I mean, we've all experienced that. I mean, I know when I lived in New Zealand in the early 1990s, I was amazed. Like, I went to the corner store there. There are people that were not busy, so they just have a long conversation with you. If you wanted to go out for the evening, you could leave your kids with the people who ran that store on the corner, and you trusted them. They wouldn't charge you any money. It's just everything there in sunny rural New Zealand was an exchange between two human beings, rather than an exchange between a customer playing that role and then the person in the store who was an extension of the database and cash register owned by that store, which is sort of what happens now in the developed world. And there's a commoditization of almost everything, and then there's a commoditization of the little chunks of human interaction that you get when going about doing your life. And it seems there's a possibility to somewhat reverse that trend and bring more of what we'd call a human touch back into interactions. And there's a lot of subtlety in the way that money, as a linear, one-dimensional arbiter of all value, goes along with the sort of dehumanization or depersonalization of interactions. And ultimately, I keep hesitating at the words dehumanization and human touch, because once you have advanced AIs, say, the same issues will come up. I mean, two AIs can interact in a way that involves none of the emotions or mentality or particulars of those AIs, or two AIs can interact in more of a deep I-you way, right? It's not a matter of human versus machine. It's a matter of whether the self and the being and the context of the agents in an interaction really intersect with each other in a deep way, or whether there's something like a linear monetary system that trivializes it and commoditizes that interaction. And I'll come back to that point more concretely at the end when I talk about some examples of how things might go differently in a post-money economy, in examples like manufacturing, for instance. So, yeah, this was a sort of constellation of ideas in my head when I wrote that first fairly high-level paper on offer networks. I mean, I was thinking, we've got these two trends going on. We've got democracy of information and increasing oligarchy of resources, but can't we have some sort of democracy of resources, some sort of self-organizing network for exchanging things we do for each other and things we make out of physical objects, instead of just for book reviews or for web search or Coursera courses and other things that are currently in this sort of already, in a way, in a trans-money economy. And I agree with Francis's vision. In the long run, I think money may continue to play a role. Many different currencies may continue to play a role in various ways. But I think we can have an economy where money isn't the basic method of exchanging things, but rather there's a more fundamental foundation of exchanges arranged between one individual and another, and then mediated by a complex collection of algorithms that are doing complex matching operations among different people. So I thought a bit about how you would get there, and what concrete steps we might take now toward offer network type systems, and that's something I'll be interested to get feedback from on you guys. Actually, I mean, I've been playing with a few different examples of what could be early stage offer networks. I mean, one of them that I had a student intern build a very crude prototype of, and then he got bored and started playing with robots instead. But it was working on the prototype was interesting just for thinking through the concepts. I mean, the example I was taking there, which is not the most lucrative or influential example, but just one that was useful for working through the concepts, is writing reviews of books or articles or music, because that's something meaningful in my own life. Like I would love to have more people write, hopefully good, but reviews of books and articles I've written and post them online. Now, for whatever social reasons of dignity or convention, I'm not going to pay someone $100 to post a good review of my book on Amazon, although that might rationally be to my benefit, but I'm not going to do it, right? On the other hand, would I agree with someone that, like, okay, I'll write a review of your book and post it. If you write a review of my book and post it, then I know we both basically like each other's books, so I'm not lying in order to get something. But that's an exchange that could be mediated that right now doesn't happen that often, although it could be to mutual benefit. And I mean, the same is true for, say, indie bands. I mean, a lot of bands post music online. They could listen to each other's music and post good comments about it. Now, that happens in bands in the same community in the same town, right? But that kind of thing certainly could happen more. So that's a very simplistic example of an offer network, because the exchanges would mostly be binary. But it does serve just to make the idea concrete. Like, you could go to a site and say, well, I'll offer to review anyone's book on, say, advanced science in physics, computer science, or math, if someone will review my book in the same area, and someone else may make a similar offer, then you connect. Or it could be with three people. Like, I'll review someone's math book if someone will review my science fiction book. And then the guy who has the math book isn't the same as the guy who reviewed the science fiction book, but it could go in a larger network. So that's not necessarily a great idea for a website to launch. It might be, but it's an illustration of the concept. Now, when I presented this concept to my friends and employees in Ethiopia, they were more excited about the potential for team building, which is also something that Weaver and Victoras raised in our discussions on the topic. So there the idea would be, let's say you want to start a rock band. You could say, well, I'm a keyboardist, and I'd like to join a jazz fusion band if I can find, a drummer, a guitarist, and a bass player, right? And then there would be potentially too many people, but then I can list, okay, here I'm a fan of Buckethead, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Coltrane, whatever the main influences are. Then that illustrates what I thought was a distinction between hard constraints and soft constraints. So there, my hard constraints where I feel I need a drummer, a guitarist, and a bass player. Otherwise, it's not the kind of band I want to be in. No, maybe that's too rigid, right? But you can specify those as that's what you're looking for. But then specifying which bands you're influenced by is a way of illustrating what sound you want. And that could be a sort of soft match. So the drummer may not have heard of Buckethead, right? But if he likes, Coltrane, Charles Mingus, Ornette Coleman, the matching algorithm may decide, well, that's a bunch of weird improvisatory musicians. So that's a good enough match to the guys who've been listed as his influences. So put those together. And, a startup software company or open source project would be similar. I could say I'm willing to put, 10 hours a week for a year into developing an AI musician that will improvise along with me, if 20 other people are also willing to put in 10 hours a week for that year. And if enough people sign up, then we can all do it. And I think having a mechanism for that actually would help and would pull more groups together. I mean, you can do that anyway. You can start a project on GitHub and try to get people to join, or you can troll around on email lists. But it's kind of a pain. Whereas if there were an explicit way to just say, I'll do this, if more people will do that, I think that would cause more groups to agglomerate. And this could also be used for more basic everyday life things in a way that verges on direct democracy. So one example is where my mother lives in Rehoboth, Delaware in the U.S., the public transit system is horribly bad. Like there's no regular bus going from Rehoboth to Wilmington, the main city in Delaware, because Delaware has no state taxes, so they have a terrible public transit system. Now, what if you could go and say, I'll pay $100, I'll commit $100 per year if there will be a bus service at least once per day back and forth between these two cities, right? So basically you're agreeing to prepay $100 per year in bus fare for yourself or your family or whatever. If 5,000 other people agree to do that also, that or whatever the right number is, that would fund that bus service, right? And that example I think would actually happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because, the state senate is in Newark. Most state senators don't care about a bus there. And plus, most people in Rehoboth don't know who their state senator is or bother to write them a letter saying, we want a bus. I mean, the political process is sufficiently indirect. People don't want to waste their time on it. But that would be extremely direct. You'd just be saying, yeah, I'll pay this for this, right? And that's verges on ideas like liquid democracy and being able to specify what each dollar of your taxes goes to. But you could do that sidestepping the government, for that matter. I mean, that can be done by some sort of private organization. So there's a lot of examples. I mean, the book Review Exchange is just one of them. There's a lot of examples you could think of now where this sort of methodology could have a positive impact. And one could view doing some simple applications like this now as a way of building tools and refining the tools for offer networks. And it's a way of implanting the meme of offer networks more thoroughly into the public mind, which then hopefully the global brain would pick up on and take as seeds for the spreading of the offer network idea through more and more of the economy. So being originally a mathematician and Czar having an undergrad degree in math at first, so I started thinking about this matching problem as a mathematical or computer science problem, as an optimization problem. And I don't want to go into this too deeply here, but I have the principle. It's good to show one slide of small incomprehensible equations that no one can understand, just to prove you're clever, so nobody will argue with you too much. So here they are. These are equations. See, it's like subscripts and superscripts. Yeah. You're right. That's also made free. Yeah.
In my next presentation, I'm going to start my slide with a bunch of equations, and then Francis will be happy.
No, then I will start asking questions.
Yeah, watch out, you can understand them.
Make them small enough.
That's great. Yeah, what we did in this document, which we didn't publish, but I'm actually happy to send anyone, we took the math problem of, you have a group of people, each person offered to do one type of thing, matching certain hard constraints and certain soft constraints, in exchange for getting another sort of thing. So I will say I will review a science fiction book of length less than 500 pages if, for me, someone will write a love song or something of length at least 3 minutes. So whatever it is, I would do X if I got Y. And it could be a disjunction. I'll do X or Y if someone will do A or B. So you have a bunch of people who have made offers of this nature. And in addition to the hard and fast offers, they've given some information about themselves, about the soft criteria they would rather have, that are nice to haves rather than absolute must-haves. And we formulated that as an optimization problem. Showed you could set it up as what's called a Boolean satisfaction problem using a weighted Boolean optimization. And then it would seem you could solve that using existing SAT solver software. Now we didn't actually implement this in software, but we wrote out the equations and I identified which open source satisfaction software you could use to do this. So I think if someone were to build an offer network website, even if it got millions of different offers, you could find reasonable matches using existing technology. It doesn't need AGI, it's just optimization. SAT solvers are pretty sophisticated, they're cool, but it's a known technology. No. There is room for AI here, which is interesting. I'll talk about that in a moment, but you don't need strong AI in any sense to solve this sort of matching problem. I did get some respect for the user interface problem here, though, because even in specifying what kind of book you would review, it's a pain to specify the length and the genre, the different possibilities. And then if you're looking to form a software team, just the number of criteria you'd have to specify are annoying. So if you were going to really build websites like this, either you have to put a lot of effort into making slick interface design for each little domain, book reviewing, music reviewing, software team formation, open source team formation, company formation, or you need a really smart AI to sort of take people's natural language descriptions and boil them into hard and soft constraints automatically, which is interesting, but then becomes a research project. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even for such a small project, the book review, it might be more flexible to have a kind of job ticketing system. Like you just put the books you want to be reviewed, and then other people can upvote them, and then you have a list. You see the list of all the books which need reviews, and you choose the one which that you want to read. Afterwards, you could need an algorithm if there are millions of books, for example.
The problem is that he still works with the if-then. I'm willing to review the book if somebody else reviews it.
But
That's what I criticize.
But that could actually be consistent with your interface suggestion. I mean, if you had a whole long list of books, I mean, as long as each of those books was put there by someone who's willing to review some book in exchange for his book being reviewed, then, I mean, that interface design could still be put there. Actually, in the prototype we had, you could offer it just to review someone's book as a gift also, and then you build up your reputation points. So we had both options.
But the interface problem, I think, is you need to have a good ontology that not only says what are the typical properties of a book, but it also has good defaults, because most people don't want to get into detail. But there should be good defaults like fiction, non-fiction, and within fiction, science fiction, fantasy, detective,
No, we did
romance.
that. We did that, and that's okay for the book review domain. The issue is you have to do that again for each little micro domain that you're worried about. So it's just a substantial undertaking.
Yeah.
So here's another idea I put in the first paper, which is a little bit subtler, and it's not a critical part of the paradigm, but I think is interesting. I started to think about, okay, there's some things where money is just useful. Like I want to go to the store and buy some toothpaste. I mean, we're not yet in a society of abundance where toothpaste is free, but I don't really want to spend my time entering. In practice, I'm very busy. I don't want to enter into an IU interaction with the person selling toothpaste here in Brussels. And say, like, how can I help you out? Can I help your kid solve a math problem for 30 seconds in exchange for getting this tube of toothpaste?
I wondered why you smelled a little funny.
Yeah. That's a different reason. Yeah. So, it seems, since we don't yet have the Drexlerian molecular assemblers, so there's still some value for financial transactions, for small things. When traveling, that particularly comes up, because I mean, in the village where I live, I interact with those same people over and over again, so there's a lot of room for kind of informal reciprocity. I'm here for a few days. I mean, either it's got to be a gift or it's got to be a monetary transaction. It's not going to be reciprocal, right? And we're not quite abundant enough that Belgians want to give me free toothpaste, so maybe they should. So what I started thinking about is, how could you ground the currency in a network of offers, which would be a totally different way to create money. So the first thing I thought is you have to rank order the offers. And here the exchange is useful, because if I offer to do A in exchange for B, someone else offers to do B in exchange for C, and so forth. Through that whole network, you could do a math analysis and see which offers dominate which other offers. Like offering this, when you cash out the whole network of offers for offers for offers for offers, offering A will get you anything offering B would get you, but not vice versa. And if you had a really big network, then you could rank order offers that way, and you can see that in a practical context. I mean, say pomegranates were very rare and oranges were very common, there were thousands of people offering pomegranates in exchange for stuff, thousands of people offering oranges in exchange for stuff. I mean, overall, the stuff you could get for a pomegranate would be more on the whole than the stuff you could get for an orange when you cashed out the multiple chains of exchange. So in a big offer network, you can meaningfully rank order offers. And that's interesting. Then you could assign...
Can you really? Because the idea is that you want to exchange A for B, I want to exchange B for A, so A and B don't really dominate each other.
That could happen, but that's going to be a rare case in a large network. I mean, you could have a pathology.
But no, I don't think it's a pathology. Like the example I gave, was a tree loop.
Yeah.
You want to exchange A for B, I want to exchange B for C, the third guy wants to exchange C for A, and we're all happy. That's the ideal situation, it's not a pathology. But in that case, you can't say which of the A.
But that's a very, very small network. So imagine you have a very large network, right? And then there's, say, getting help with your math homework from a mathematician, or getting help with your math homework from a middle school student, right? And say there are thousands of people who are saying, I'll offer this in order to get math homework from a mathematician, and there's thousands of people who will offer something to get help with their math homework from a middle school student. Now, each of those things would be traded for math homework from a mathematician, say repairing a car or something. Each of those could be exchanged for something else. Each of the offers to get math homework for a middle school student could be exchanged for something else. But those things are going to be less valuable than what got exchanged for math homework from a mathematician. So I think in a large network, you can cash it out and say that one offer.
I would have to think about it, but
I've already thought about it.
Yeah, you have thought about it, but my intuition that the ideal network is one which is a closed loop where everything in the end gets recycled somewhere so that there is no partial order.
Well,
So
just
there will be a partial order in the sense if you allow numbers, if you allow to say, will you
saying
exchange
that-
one pomegranate for 3 oranges and you can automatically deduce that 1 orange is less than 1 pomegranate.
you're looking only at the offers that got fulfilled, and I'm looking at all the requests that were made. So the offers that were actually fulfilled form a circular network like that.
Yeah.
But if there's a larger collection of requests that were made, not all of them got fulfilled, and there are asymmetries there.
Because there were people who were asking for more than they were.
Exactly, which is human nature, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Which is rational behavior. You offer a bit more, then you offer a bit less.
Yeah, it's
and then you see
like
what you get.
bidding, right? You
Yeah.
bid by starting low, and
Yeah.
you know that nobody else bids more, and if then somebody else bids more, you
Yeah,
bid lower.
Exactly.
Does it mean that if there is a rank order, it means that everything is a kind of a global value?
You could approximate a global value that way, yeah. But what's interesting about rank ordering is, I mean, it doesn't exaggerate things in the way that a traditional money economy does. I mean, if you assign, you could normalize it however you want. So the top rank thing, like how much more is that worth than the mid-rank thing? It doesn't have to be 1,000,000 times more. It could be twice as more, for example. So you could actually, you could scale that as you wanted, right? But what this idea would give you, potentially, would be, so you could do something and get something else in exchange, an actual action or service, or you could do something and you could get some of this offer network grounded money in exchange, which you could then use to get things. So it gives a different way of grounding a currency, because it grounds the currency in the exchange network, rather than, I mean, say, otherwise, what are you stuck with? You're stuck with like gold, which will be meaningless once you can synthesize gold out of molecules. And anyway, it's absurd because it just rewards whoever sits on top of the gold mine and has a big army. Or you have labor theory value, which is meaningless when you have intelligent robots doing the work, and then who owns the robots? So, grounding the currency in what people are willing to do in exchange for what other things seems like a more direct way to do it than the alternatives, actually.
Yes, but there is some kind of a local dynamics. Suppose I have my glasses do not fit me anymore. They may be valuable for somebody else, but it's not valuable for me. So there is a lot of local dynamics which is involved in the large.
Well, but still, old glasses, you could exchange old glasses for something, right? I mean, you could exchange your old glasses for a basket of fruit, maybe, but you can't exchange your old glasses for a working car. I mean, there still is an intuitive sense that some things you can exchange for more than others.
Yeah, there is some kind of partial order that can be global.
It may be possible to accept some kind of a partial order, but I would be more inclined to interpret it in terms of reputation value rather than in a kind of a cash value. But well, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just thinking, like, buying toothpaste on vacation, reputation points, it may be a stretch, right? I mean, the store will sell me toothpaste because it boosts their reputation a little bit.
Yeah, but I'm thinking that in the short term anyway we won't get rid of cash, so you will anyway pay your...
But I mean, we have stuff like Bitcoin now, so I think if you imagine you had a really big, successful offer network website, you could imagine one that had its own coinage value determined from the network of exchanges. I mean, just like Second Life had Linden dollars, that had its own currency. So if you had, say, take this software development example, right? Let's say you had software teams forming and producing software and making new groups to make projects. You can imagine sometime you just want to hire an expert to fix a problem in your code, right? Then it could be done by reciprocity, but maybe sometimes you're just in a hurry. Like, I need someone to fix this now, I'll pay for it. So then you can use ordinary money, or perhaps a system like that could have its own currency in it, and you would have built up the ability to pay for that by giving so much to other people. But it could be reputation points. That guy will get a lot of reputation.
Well, it
for
goes
helping,
together with
right?
what Jean-François was saying, that you can think of multiple currencies with multiple, expressing multiple aspects of values
Yes.
that are somehow be connected together. It's not a trivial thing. I think it will be one of the
It's not trivial.
questions that
And I was really thinking a lot.
for the future.
I was thinking a lot about like what is monetary value grounded in, because like right now in the world economy, it's not grounded on. It's just grounded on military power, basically. I mean, China owes trillions of dollars to the U.S. They can't pay it back because that would bankrupt the financial system and would cause U.S. not be able to buy China's junk, which would destroy China's economy. So money is basically defined by all these complex geopolitical interplays now, plus semi-grounded in gold, right? And I mean, Marx wanted to ground it in human labor, which never really worked even then, and works even worse now. So it's sort of just grounded in a ephemeral way, a purely self-organizing postmodern way almost. And
Yeah, but the problem is that it's grounded in things that nobody really understands, so that makes it very dangerous and uncontrollable. So it would be better if you could ground it in something that's kind of more logical, like what you said.
Yeah.
Exactly.
if you had an
But it should be relational. You cannot ground it in something absolute, like if, for example, the ecological footprint or
Well, no, but that's
because these things are always at some stage they will turn out that they are different from what you
Yeah.
thought they were, and then.
But the offer network is relational, so grounding it there works. So then, in terms of the role of AI here, I mean, as we've already discussed a bit, and when we saw in his talk, I mean, this what I've called soft constraints that's actually a humongous can of worms. I mean, the examples I gave, it's fairly simple. If I want to review a book, you know which books I've read and liked, then the system will be more likely to match me with a book that it thinks I like than with some random book. And that's handled by recommendation systems, as Francis said. And then in more and more complex cases, the matching with those soft constraints is subtler and subtler. Like if you're forming a team, I mean, it's not just recommendation, then it's like which set of people will make a compatible team, which has very many different dimensions to it. And in this case, in reality, what you do is you'd have the system suggest a team, then people would meet online or whatever and see if they hit it off. But if the AI were good at recognizing, okay, this team needs one well-organized guy to be a leader, it needs one guy who's great at debugging and so forth. If the AI could figure out what characteristics make an effective team, then it would find a group of people who match each other's hard constraints, and who the AI thought would make a compatible team altogether. And that
was my example
Yeah.
of decomposition. I gave a much simpler example.
yeah,
That we expect that the AI would collect more and more of these production rules that say if you
Yeah.
want to achieve that, then you should have this and this and this with these and these and these
Yeah.
properties combined in this and this way.
And-
So these kind of rules is something that wouldn't be there from the start, but that you would expect
Yeah.
that the global brain would learn and accumulate over years and decades, and it becomes smarter and smarter.
So this is where the main thrust of my work on AI would intersect. I mean, Francis said we need a production system with smart inference capabilities. I mean, OpenCog, the AI system I'm working on, as an example, it's not just a production system, but you can express very general production rules using predicate or term logic in there with implication links, and then there's forward and backward chaining probabilistic reasoning in there, which can be driven by data. I mean, it's still a researchy system, but it's an example of the sort of system that could be used for something like this. And that would be a whole other talk, but I mentioned that just to illustrate there is work going on exactly the kind of system that would let us fulfill this network of offers in a way that intelligently manages all the soft constraints. Like the equations Zara and I have worked out for weighted Boolean optimization and SAT solving. That will deal with the hard constraints, and it tries to deal with the soft constraints. I mean, it includes them in the objective function. So it tries to find a matching that will match as many people's hard constraints as possible and violate everyone's soft constraints as little as possible. And that's something, but it's not doing what a deeper AI system would do in terms of really figuring out what is going to fulfill the soft constraints or what isn't. The weighted Boolean optimization sort of assumes we have figured out to what extent someone's soft constraints are fulfilled or broken in each case. But actually, in some cases that can be quite difficult, right? I mean, for book recommendation, if you've read 1,000 books, it's not that difficult. For matching people in the team, it can be quite difficult. And there are just so many different cases.
Which is why I liked Florian's idea that basically the ontology and the production systems would be a protocol that everybody uses. But then the intelligence, the particular intelligent agents or intelligent algorithms, there would be lots of them and they would be competing with each other and they would definitely be open source so that whenever one seems particularly good, others can copy it and improve on it. And like that, there would be kind of an ecology of AIs working on that would gradually evolve to a smarter and smarter one that would then eventually kind of become the global brain.
Which is interesting, it will be a major deviation from how the internet is developing now, right? Because what we see now is there are a bunch of smart recommendation systems.
But they're completely closed.
And they're proprietary and owned by big companies.
Yes.
And they're playing a very active role in the concentration of global wealth in the owners of those companies. And they don't exchange knowledge with each other or build into some broader network. Further, I mean, even the more countercultural internet trends like Bitcoin are also heavily predicated on keeping everything secret rather than spreading their reputation, ranking, and their knowledge around the world. Right?
While the big success of both the internet and the web was that TCP/IP and non-HTTP were completely open and public.
That was the big success in the internet web 1.0, but that's I mean, the
It was 2.0, unfortunately, got lost.
Yeah, it got
there were hundreds of systems competing and they were all closed. And
it just got sucked into big companies. Yeah. So, that brings us to my next and final topic, actually, which is something I cover in the paper that Czar, my father, Ted Goertzel, and I put together. So we were really looking at what happens when you put together offer networks with greater transparency in the economy. And it seems like the combination of those things, which is not an inevitable combination in a sense, but the combination of these things has a lot of power. So, I mean, the trend toward greater openness and transparency is well known. I mean, if you haven't read it, David Brin's book, The Transparent Society, is a great one and covers this in a lot of detail. I mean, what he argues there is that due to the prevalence of various observation technologies, we essentially have two choices, what he calls surveillance or surveillance. And I guess his French pun will be more obvious here than to people in the US. But basically either they watch everyone or everyone watches everyone. And privacy is not particularly an option. And I pretty much buy that argument. I mean, now there's surveillance cameras almost everywhere. And furthermore, I mean, there's a big controversy recently. Google's Nest appliances, when you turn them off, aren't really off and are still recording you, right? So, and there's a bunch of... So I wouldn't doubt that's true of our phones as well. I mean, I met a guy in Beijing who was bragging very much about how the chips he made for certain Chinese cell phones take all the data to go through them and store them in a certain database he has. I guess also to the government. And he's actually looking for business deals to do with all this data he gathered. So, I mean, data is being gathered. The thing that's stopping a 1984 type situation is AI for analyzing these vast storehouses of data is still not quite there yet. And I guess in the next 10 or 20 years that will be solved. I mean, it's...
I'm not sure, because the more data they get, the more
Well,
it gets
no, but there's two hard problems there, right? One is speech to text and language processing. The other is event recognition and video. And both of these are getting a lot of money. Like recently you've seen so many breakthroughs in image processing, recognizing faces and objects, labeling pictures automatically. You know the next thing these big internet companies are going to do is video processing. They have huge archives of videos, and they have huge supercomputers of GPUs. So they're going to be able to recognize events of all sorts in video. Now once Google and Baidu and Facebook have solved that, of course these companies are all in tight with the intelligence communities of the various nations, and all the video archives being collected from surveillance cameras everywhere will be possible by that exact technology. You'll be able to go from the video to a semantic description of who was doing what in that video, right? So, I mean, the panopticon is, I don't know, 5 to 20 years off, depending on how pessimistic you are, but I don't think that's such any more than face recognition was. I mean, to tell from whatever cameras are hidden in this room who's in here, who's talking, who argued with who's whispering in whose ear, I mean, and who was texting to who on their phone. I mean, the technology for that is very close to there. And, I mean, most of us aren't doing anything hardly illegal. We didn't have anything big to hide anyway. But the fact that that will all be there in the government's database if they want it is interesting. And then what Bryn points out is there's a couple possibilities, right? One is the governments have that shared with the big companies, which are their client firms. B is everybody has that. And then he goes into the social implications of that, say, pointing out that right now, I mean, I could spy on my neighbors, like, having sex through their window. I never do, because they're ugly and it's boring, right? And, I mean,
I think you're talking too much about politics. This is too much social critique, too much, you know, go back to the mathematical
I showed an equation, so that's okay.
Go back to the, this is too much politics.
Right.
Oh, no. He's talking about government control, and this is too much.
So, to continue talking about government control, I mean, what Bryn points out is, like sitting in a restaurant, you can overhear the guy sitting next to you at the next table. And unless you're a spy or something, you very rarely bother to, because it's just not our culture, and also it's probably uninteresting. So maybe you can have everyone, in principle, knows everyone's data without it being a horrible tragedy for our lives. And there's a lot of social issues there which are interesting. And it could be the way it goes is you have an AGI nanny watching over everything and gathering all the data, and then none of us are embarrassed because it's just some AI watching our personal lives rather than people. But the point I wanted to finish with is the combination of transparency and offer network post-money exchange would have an interesting transformative effect on economic transactions. So the example we wrote about in our recent paper was drawn from my recent experience getting robots built, which is complicated. I mean, we're building these little toy robots and then some human scale robots. We build the prototypes in Hong Kong. Then we work with a design firm in China that makes the prototypes better and gives feedback on materials and the workability of the design. Then the design firm knows a bunch of factories to build different parts of the robot. Then the sub-assemblies made by different factories are put together in the design firm's office. Then some of those larger sub-assemblies are put together in the Hong Kong office. Meanwhile, you subcontract out marketing to some other company, right? And you look at what's happening in this transaction, and a lot of it is based on secrecy. So why do you have different factories make sub-assemblies and then put them together? Because you don't want any of those factories to know your whole design. Because if they do, they might just steal it and make it in their own factory and then sell it under some other label or sell it to a competitor, right? And then, of course, each factory negotiates with you independently, and you don't know how much they charged someone else to do the same thing a few months ago. So due to the need for secrecy, and then due to this bargaining element and so forth, what winds up happening is there's a profit margin taken by each of these companies, and I mean that profit goes to the shareholders of those companies, which are large banks, wealthy individuals, pension funds, whatever. And in the context of building this and working with a whole bunch of little companies and factories, a significant percentage of that money is just siphoned off to shareholders, right? Now, in this case, many of the shareholders may have embezzled the money from the Chinese government or something, or inherited it from their parents who made money with some legitimate or less legitimate business or whatever. Then their wealth increases because of the frictional cost in all these different transactions. And furthermore, before you do the big production run, I mean, it costs a lot to order like 100,000 robots built, right? So what you do, you go to a bank, you borrow money to underwrite that production run, then you have all this stuff built, then you sell it, then you pay back the bank. So then they collect some interest for temporarily lending you the money to pay for the production run, right? Again, increasing the global concentration of wealth. So how would this work in a transparent offer network-based economy? I mean, first of all, if you had more transparency, you wouldn't necessarily be worried about people stealing your design. It would be a different issue because they'd see your design anyway, and you'd have to prevail on some other basis than keeping your idea secret. Now, you can imagine, say, crowdfunding as the initial basis of this sort of manufacturing process, then backed up by a chain of offers, right? So let's say I had an idea for a robot to make. So first of all, I could plan to launch a crowdfunding campaign. Now I need a video and some artwork. I can go to some guy and say, well, getting back to the time aspect that Weaver mentioned, I could say, well, if you'll help me make this video and this artwork, right, then, I'll give you some percentage of what I get from selling all these robots, assuming it succeeds, right? And that could be measured by offer coins, or it could be measured in some other way. Or I could say more concretely, if you do this artwork for me, then if the campaign succeeds, then I'll be willing to offer 100 hours of programming on your behalf, which then they could offer to somebody else if they didn't need the programming done, and which I would make it other people to do for me in exchange for offering them something in exchange for their programming. So then we do the Kickstarter campaign. We say, hey, we will build this robot if enough people offer to do enough stuff in exchange for the robot. So in exchange for your robot, you can offer blah, 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 right? So if 100 people offer one of the things that was offered in exchange for a robot, in order to get a robot, then you can say, hey, great, let's build these robots, right? Now then what do you have to work with? You have the offers made by these 100,000 people in exchange for getting their robots. Now those offers are what you have to use in order to get the robots built. You go to the design firm and to the factory. You can offer that design firm and that factory any subset of what people offered you in exchange for getting their robots in order to do their bit of it. And of course, these organizations of factories and design firms and marketing firms don't need to be corporations with shareholders. They could be, say, open value networks or different sorts of loosely organized confederations of people who have agreed to work together. The reason that could work here is because you don't need capital in the traditional sense to start an organization. What you need is for people to have committed to give you something in exchange for you giving them something, or to give you something for the reputation points that we get for giving you something. So if you could construct the robot by this collection of exchanges offered over time in a certain way, then it's interesting, you don't need a bank loan at any point in the way, and there are no wealthy shareholders who are connecting the profits, right? It's all done by direct transactions between individuals who are doing something directly for the production of this. Now, where something like shareholders would come in is if someone didn't have enough reputation to get what they wanted, then how do I get that guy's reputation? Well, I'll do something for you so that you will ask for this for me using your greater reputation. And if you had something like that, you'd have something more like we have now, where people with no direct participation in it are necessary and
well,
benefit
using
from
somebody
it.
else's reputation may not be a bad thing. Assume that I'm a young student, I have zero reputation, I go to this famous professor and I manage to convince him that I'm a very smart guy, and I'm asking you, are you willing to vouch for me so that I can go to this conference? He writes a recommendation letter. That's being used.
Yeah.
You could say that's abuse of reputation, but it's not. If the professor will only write a letter to somebody that he thinks deserves it. So if somebody with a high reputation uses his reputation to help somebody with a low
So
reputation,
what we would
if he doesn't do it correctly, he will lose some reputation.
So I guess you're right, and what that comes down to is that professor has given something to the process by the time they put in to directly vet that student, right? So I mean, the work you put in working with that student is what made you willing to recommend that student, because there was you invested something in that. So,
I'm speaking from experience because I've done it often. A student that I just think is talented and I'm willing to help. And then I kind of implicitly assume that at some later stage that student may also be doing something for me. There is no reciprocity.
yeah.
I'm writing a letter for you if you do this for me. That would be the offer network in your view.
Yeah.
One thing for another thing. In this case, I like the student, I like the recommendation letter. 2 years later, I meet that student, and he said, I'm now working in MIT, and I've arranged to get you invited there to give a talk. I said, oh well, very nice. So it's kind of reciprocation, but
yeah. So this goes up to my last point. What I think would be interesting to do with this idea next, if resources were available in monetary or volunteer form or whatever, there's really two different things. One would be to create a couple offer network situations that actual people would use and study what happened and vary them experimentally to see what worked better. The other would be to build some simulations, and probably not only highly general abstract simulations, but simulations of specific types of offer networks, be it physical barter goods or be it manufacturing ecosystem. Like how would hardware manufacturing work if it were an offer network? So
that was one of my old ideas. It's an ecosystem of businesses that need certain things, produce certain things. Can we find by some smart algorithm a maximum matching so that the one becomes supplier of the other and clients of the other? I think that would be the for something that could do that.
And there's a lot of subtlety there, right? Like in a recent problem I didn't have, but one of my partners had. I mean, someone ordered $400,000 of automated pill dispensers from him. So they gave him a $100,000 deposit. He had them built. Then that guy went broke and didn't want the pill dispensers. And then it rushes around figuring out there were bank loans involved. I mean, so that there's a lot of complexity because there's factories and physical stuff, right? But still, that's what a lot of the world is. And the thing is, the banking system and the manufacturing ecosystem has adapted over a long time. So it's fairly finely tuned to work okay. And there's probably a lot of tuning of the offer network paradigm and the specifics that we would need to fill with to make it really work nicely when you have these different things happening on different time scales by different kinds of actors with different levels of commitment and reliability. And plus, these are not just individuals, right? Because the factory that can do plastic extrusion and stuff has got to be a whole bunch of people with different levels of commitment and skill working as a unit in order to deliver this. And then there's some risk that unit dissolves, and then who made the commitment and so forth. So there's a fair bit of subtlety in real world cases, but it's certainly not too much to simulate in software and then experiment with what would happen. And if one could show in such a simulation, just turn that off.
Was that a call from a different dimension?
Yeah, that's a call from
You had contact.
the Jello
Anyone had
Yeah. So simulations could cover larger scale and more complex situations than we would get with some small test deployments, unless we got lucky and created the next open source offer network Facebook or something. But you would learn something both from small scale.
That's why I want to start on the campus, like Facebook also started on
Yeah,
campus.
you'd learn something from small scale deployments with actual people and a limited function, and also from larger scale simulations that could cover hardware manufacture, which is not something we're going to deploy immediately because you just can't. It's too expensive to do on your own, and that's because now. I mean, as anyone who's built anything in the real world knows, there's a long journey from ideas and equations to something that functions in reality, and there's always lots of adaptation and changes in direction along the way. But I think this constellation of ideas is interesting enough that it should start making that journey. And as Cadell pointed out with the list that I saw, there's a bunch of offer network type software systems out there, but that doesn't mean any of them is close enough or quite right to really take off and let you explore the idea. And I haven't studied all of them that carefully, but I mean, social network sites the same way. I mean, there were a lot of those early on. Friendster didn't get it quite right, for example. It took a while until the paradigm was gotten well enough. Then you have things like Facebook and LinkedIn and WeChat that get all the details well enough to match human psychology and sociology. Yeah.
What do you think of the idea that these forms of gift or sharing economy exchanges would get a whole nother level of effectiveness in a semantic web or an AI technology platform? Like that Web 2.0 isn't enough for these platforms that a Web 3.0 is necessary.
I don't think much about these web end appellations, but I do think about AI. I mean, I think that to make a global offer network like Francis was envisioning work, you'll need either AGI or a constellation of many powerful narrow AIs working together to deal with the soft constraints, which, as we saw in his talk, are quite deep and subtle to deal with and context dependent. So I think you need an AI to make it work in general, but in the initial stages, there's probably vertical applications for offer networks that you could do with just a combinatorial optimization algorithm or something even simpler. So that's but to do it in general, yeah, you need advanced AI, and I mean there are more or less AI-centric applications, I guess. I mean that's actually where I started with, was thinking of this as a cool application of AI and optimization theory. And then when I got into it more, I could see some of the more interesting applications were not that heavy on the AI or optimization after all, like team formations. But I think AI is going to happen anyway. I'm more confident advanced AI will come than that humans will get a generally beneficent post-money economy. So it's more about how can you leverage the AI that's happening to make this sort of good thing happen.
I mean,
At this point, I'm with you. I think.
my problem is always AI is not a thing. AI is some ability that can be used for all kinds of things. But for which kind of things are you going to use it? There are more useful applications. There are less useful applications. Is it an extremely useful application? I can think of plenty of less useful ones that probably also somewhere will be used. But
Well, your language presumes that AI is a tool rather than an autonomous agent, which is not the only possible situation.
Because I believe, as you know, that the real autonomous intelligence will be the global brain, and all the AIs will merely be modules in the global brain, just like we will be, in a sense, modules in the global brain.
But certainly you would accept an AI could have the same kind of autonomy that you have. No?
Maybe, though not very soon.
What if we start losing autonomy as the global brain gains this?
We are already, we just don't
So
notice.
then an AI might not be in the same position that we are.
No, I think we are much less autonomous than we think we are. We are dependent on 100,000 things, from nature to society, to education, to language. We just tend to like to believe of ourselves being very autonomous. Most people are very predictable and follow lots of rules. So I think people who
Predictable
wonder.
and autonomous. You could be both predictable and autonomous.
Yeah, but I think most people
We
who
just
are
happen
so
to choose to
afraid
do
of
what
losing
society
their-
wants us to do.
No, but
It's like free choice.
It's my free choice to do what the universe has determined me to do. It's a comment. That's Leibniz's theory of free will. Actually.
My impression has always been that those people who are most worried about losing their autonomy are the people who are least autonomous. The ones who really are autonomous, they know they will remain autonomous. If you think for yourself, you're not afraid of AI or of the state or of this or that telling you how to think, because you know that you think for yourself. It's those people who don't think for themselves that are afraid of losing their autonomy.
How will you feel after you get the government mandated brain implant?
Kind of an extreme force.
Well, then I'm still waiting for the government use sexual reproduction implants. So.
Well, it's
That's
more.
something they could have done already.
You're
but
still waiting for
they're
the
not
design
doing it.
phase.
Huh?
Well,
So that society can decide who is allowed to property.
It's not choosing you, sorry.
No, I
yeah. You just haven't heard about it because you weren't on the list.
I still think the worst attack on autonomy is fundamentalist religious education. If there's one thing that destroys your autonomy, it's them telling you you should do this and this and this, and if not, God will punish you, you will burn in hell. If there's a more effective way to take away somebody's autonomy apart from throwing him in jail, I don't know any.
That was pretty a century. You are still there. Yes. Much has changed.
They're just around
Much
the
has
corner.
changed in this respect.
They are inevitably, they're not around the corner, it's not everywhere.
So the one thing I was curious to get some brainstorming about was.
Well, I suggest that maybe first we have a coffee because
Yeah,
it's
sure.
pretty long, and then we'll have a very long.
Let me plant the idea in people's heads and we'll have coffee. So, I mentioned a few applications of offer networks that kind of popped into the heads of myself and my colleagues, but I'm not confident any of us have yet found like what is the first killer app for offer networks. So, interesting if anyone has lateral thinking about what would be interesting near-term first few applications of an offer network to launch, both here or, for example, in the developing world, which is being treated worse by the money economy right now. So if anyone thinks of cool ideas during the coffee break, I'd be curious to hear them after.